What up, y'all? We're doing we're continuing on with the last so far of the Beverly Hills Cop series. I know Eddie Murphy, and I'll probably talk about a bit about this in the end. He's talking about doing a fourth film, but yeah, we'll talk about the third one right now, and then either later tonight or most likely tomorrow. I'll do a 48 hours, which I already watched. That's a fun movie. Him and Nick Nolte had a good dynamic. It's pretty fun. It's a fun movie, and it's pretty on PC. So I'll talk about that one, and then yeah. But for Beverly Hills Cop 3, this one came out in 1994. So this would have been almost, I think, 4 years or so after the after Beverly Hills Cop 2. And this was, like I mentioned yesterday, this was when, because Eddie kind of got tired of being known as just Axel Foley and like his comedic characters. So there was like a period before he started, before he did this movie, he was just doing like more serious roles. And he just didn't want to, so that's why he took so long to do a Beverly Hills Cop 3. I think they wanted to do one way earlier, but he never did it. And they wanted to do a series also, and I think they were then gonna do like a Taggart and a Rosewood spinoff, but that didn't happen. So it took so long, and then we get this movie. And this one was very like shit on pretty much by most people. I don't hate it. Remember watching it a few years ago because I, for the most part, stuck to the first two. I didn't even remember there being a third one. I always only remember there only being two. And then yeah, I finally watched it. It's not terrible. I like the whole Todd death aspect. It's just the villain's very basic. Like even for like movies like this, he's just a guy who wants money, and they did it like at a Wonder World, which that was okay. Hector Elizondo is in it, or yeah, he's in a lot of stuff. Um, yeah, especially I think like television is where I mainly have seen him. But um, Rosewood's back. He's like a chief now. The villain's name is Ellis DeWald. He's just very basic. John Saxon's in it, which that's pretty cool. You might recognize him. He's the father from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. He's Nancy's dad, and I think he's done a lot of like martial arts movies too. But like, that's if you most recognize him, you'll recognize him as the father from a Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's set. It's I don't even really think it's set in Beverly Hills. Really, it's kind of like they broadened it out. Oh, I guess no, it is in Beverly Hills. I'm trying to. Yeah, it was gonna be Rose. So I'm looking at like the original. They were gonna be going to London, which I actually would have liked to have seen that movie. And I think the biggest holdback from this movie for me, it's set in the '90s. It's too late '90s, well mid '90s, but it just felt like a different era. Um, and it was cool to see Universal because part of Wonder World was basically Universal. Like the part where the thing comes up, that's where like because I was there like a few months ago, and it was cool to seeing that, I guess. But it's an okay movie. Like if you want to watch it along with as a trilogy, you can. It doesn't feel like a trilogy, and it just feels like, oh, it's just another Beverly Hills Cop. It's not horrible. It's Eddie Murphy. He has some okay moments, but it's definitely the weakest of the three. It's not as I don't think it's a complete shit show though. So here we go. But this movie starts off with Axel kind of doing his own operation, which is kind of cool to see Obviously because now he's just like by this point he would be somewhat of a veteran, and Todd's like watching, and it's kind of cool to see them have a different kind of I did like that. They have more of like kind of a friendship felt in this one, because in the first two, obviously Todd just yells at him most of the time, but then because they're trying to break doing a raid this shop that has been because they didn't want to use SWAT, and they were trying to raid a chop shop that hijacked a van, and then the bad guy comes in seeming like he was gonna buy the stuff. He kills everybody in there. Then big shootout happens, and obviously everything goes to shit, and Inspector Todd tries to go in there and he gets shot, which I did like that. And his death, I think, was well executed. And I thought that was a good motivation for Axel. And then obviously DeWald gets away, and the only evidence is that they find a Wonderworld towel. And then you get kind of like a cool little funeral scene, and then Axel basically tells Todd's wife that he's gonna find who did it. So he travels to Beverly Hills. You don't get like that cool little montage, like hold on. You don't get that cool like montage like in the first two movies. He just kind of arrives, and then he arrives and meets up with Rosewood, and it's mentioned Taggart moved to Arizona. I think probably they just maybe didn't. I don't know what happened. They couldn't get the actor to come back, or it just took too long. I think that's fundamentally what it was. This film just took too long. Beverly Hills Cop 3 should have happened, in my view, 89. Maybe like 90, the latest, if you're going to do it in the 90s, it should have been 90, 91. I think that time would have been about that slot. Doing it now is just so late. It just, especially considering, like, by 94, just the climate was completely different. Obviously, we're in that post-grunge era. Kurt Cobain's obviously about to die. I think even movies kind of had a shift. And I just don't know if I'm Beverly. And you know what? Another weakness is the soundtrack. They try to modernize it, and I get what they're going for. Especially as someone who's, I guess I'll use like a Halloween, or example, where a lot of the time they do change the theme for whatever the movie is in like whatever decade. Like Halloween 4 is in the late 80s, so that one had a more late 80s sound, but it still had that classic feel to it. Whereas this one, it just felt weird trying to modernize that. They should have just kept. There was no need to do that. I don't think there was any need to change the song at all, like or change the pitch. Just take one of the scores from literally Beverly Hills Cop 1 or 2 and just reuse it. Who cares? Jurassic Park did it. I mean, pretty much Lost World. Yeah, there was a different score, but they did play that classic score. Same with the newer movies. You still have that classic score in there. Just like you don't need it. You don't really need to change it. Don't. Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it just wasn't. It just didn't work. So we're introduced to Rosewood, who's now a sergeant now, which is kind of cool to see, and he's still a fun part of the movie. God damn it. Then we're introduced to John Flynn, played by Hector Elizondo. He's a decent character in this. He's a fun. Yeah, he's no Taggart. But I think that's kind of what does hold this movie up, is those three are still kind of decent in this. So, and like Eddie Murphy still has some funny moments in it. It's just they had to it just wasn't as great. So then he goes to Wonderworld, buys a ticket, obviously gets accosted by a security, and then we meet Janice Perkins, who is kind of like the love interest, which is kind of a first because Beverly Hills Cop didn't really have a love. It's one of those few movies, especially at that time, because often most movies always had like a love subplot majority of the time, even if it's like a slasher, whatever genre, action. You typically there was always gonna be like some romance. So Beverly Hills Cop was kind of interesting that they never did the romance thing. You could tell Axel's in a girl's, but he wasn't like trying to get a girlfriend or anything in the first two movies. So I think it's interesting they did try to do that. Like it's cool they try to change it up a bit. Like I think though they should have did the London one. That would have probably been. They could have still did it, even if it was just gonna be Rosewood and Axel. I think they could have still did it. Like there was doing it at a park just did not work. It felt very weird. And then he gets spotted by security. There's a shootout. He gets taken in. This is where we meet the head of the park, Orrin Sanderson. This is John Saxon's character. Obviously plays it off like, oh, this guy's crazy. Throughout the film, they want to make it seem like Axel is seen as this crazy guy. So yeah, he gets taken back by Rosewood and Axel. DeWald is getting an award because DeWald's the one who killed Todd. I should have probably mentioned that. An award for like some kind of award, basically. So Axel and Rosewood want to catch, and then we get a scene where we're introduced to Uncle Dave, who's like the originator, who like I think he basically created the park and he owns it. He's a pretty fun character. They have some fun scenes between him and Axel. Then Rosewood and Axel go to the event, and we're reintroduced to Serge, who's actually a funny character. I actually like him in this. That's another positive. We do got at least somewhat of a carryover character from the first movie, and he introduces this. He created this like gun, like this very fancy like gun that's like used in like this fancy shoot, and it's obviously kind of it's foreshadowing what's gonna happen in the end, but it's pretty funny. So then they crash the event. Axel, causes a scene at the event, gets accosted, and we get like a big fight at the police state at the event. Then so now Axel's like a target at the park. It's like basically you see him, you gotta get him. So he disguises himself as I think before that, after there was a scene where Rosewood has like this big raid on a truck. This scene was pretty fun. He has like this whole SWAT on this one truck. There's like nothing in it, but like evidence of them making money, fake money, which what the bad guys were doing. This is an okay film. I think it just isn't as good as the first two, and I'll admit, I look at this as like Rocky 5 in a way. Not great. It has some decent moments, and it's just one I'm not gonna watch as much compared to the other ones. So, but it's not completely horrible. I think some people overly shit on it because like this isn't as bad as like a lot of movies are, or some movies are. So then we get a scene where Axel meets up with goes to the park again disguised as as like one of the characters from Wonderworld, sorry. He pretty much asks out Janice. She says yes, and then he causes a scene. We get like this big action scene where he like tries to, because he figures out they're making fake money. And then he meets with Uncle Dave later, and then Uncle Dave gets killed by DeWald. He doesn't get killed; he gets shot. Then Axel gets away, meets with Serge. He gets that gun because he's gonna go to Wonderworld because they kidnapped Janice, and then basically we get the final act, and Rosewood gets called in. Him and Janice get captured. Axel, causes a scene. We get this big shootout. The final act's okay. It's kind of fun at a park. They're doing it at like this amusement park, which is pretty interesting. And then he uses the gun this weapon Serge gives him. Yeah, it starts off like it plays like this, I think, Eazy-E song, and then it plays like another song, and then it finally shoots like a rocket and it blows some guys up. It's pretty funny. Then they have like this final fight in this like Land of the Dinosaurs exhibit, which was pretty cool, especially as a dinosaur fan. And then so Axel kills the bad guy. Oh, and I didn't mention throughout the film there's this like FBI guy that you see throughout the film is playing like, oh, we're fucking. He basically talks to Axel about like fucking up his like um, mission because he's trying to like get him, but it turns out he's actually working with him, and then yeah, he gets killed, and then you have like this funny scene where like Rosewood, Flynn, and Axel are all shot, and just that was a funny little ending, and then Axel gets made into a character at the park, and then the film ends. It's an okay movie. It's definitely not as strong as the first two, and like I said, they waited way too long to make this. This should have happened in like the early '90s or '89. There was no reason to take so long to make it. But at the end of the day, it happened this way. But it's still not a horrible film. If you want to watch it, it doesn't feel like a trilogy though. It doesn't. This one doesn't feel like a. You have that feeling of a trilogy where it ends it. This doesn't feel like that. They easily probably could have made a fourth. Speaking of which, they are talking about doing a fourth one because um, Eddie Murphy did Coming to America too, which was trash. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't finish it even. It was so bad. So here's my thoughts on them doing a Beverly Hills Cop 4. I just don't want it. It's not even because how bad Coming to America 2 was. It's just I don't know if I want a Beverly Hills Cop set in 2020. Like I guess let's say if it came out like 2022 or 2023, I wouldn't want that. I want a Beverly Hills Cop. I like that 80s aesthetic. Even that's why, like I mentioned in this review, 3 even has some issues because it just that 90s feel just doesn't work. And then I shouldn't even mention Axel doesn't even look the same. Axel to me is when he has that like high top fade in those first 2 movies. That is why I like those movies. Like I watch them because I think that aesthetic works for those. Setting it in modern times just doesn't work. I don't know if I would want that. And what are you gonna bring Rosewood? And then what would the story even be? Doing a modern. I think that's the other problem. You'd have to explain what's Axel been doing since 1994. I think there's no reason to do it. I just think you did it. I get Eddie Murphy maybe wants to make up for Beverly Hills Cop 3, but it's just no, just no mas. We don't need it. I don't need it anyway. Like I don't even hate Beverly Hills Cop 3. I don't know if I want one in modern times. And what would even the story be like? I think I'm gonna compare it to like why stuff like Jurassic and like Halloween or Alien you can continue into modern times is because those stories have more to tell. Whereas I just don't think Beverly Hills Cop does. What are you gonna do with a fourth film? Like, oh, they're gonna fight another bad guy? What are they gonna do the London one again? Like, I don't know if even then I don't know if I want that one like now. I don't want it in modern times. Like Beverly Hills Cop had its time. I think it's one of those franchises. Just keep it the way it is. It doesn't need another one. I just don't think there's a like even Ghostbusters. You can still do at least like kind of what they're doing now. They're doing another one. There's still some way you could tell a story there. I just don't think Beverly Hills Cop there's really more to tell. Like there's not much more to learn about Axel. Is he? And that's another thing. I don't know if his Axel Foley trick, character can even work now. Because I think even then, those movies, I'm pretty sure were R rated, or at least, yeah, they were R rated because you saw titties in the first 2. And, they cursed a lot. So I just think if you're not gonna make it R rating, try to make it PG-13. It ain't gonna work. It just so there's that. Yeah. But Beverly Hills Cop 3, I would give like a 7 out of 10. It's an okay watch if you're in the mood to watch all 3. I definitely won't watch it as much, but it's not a terrible film. But yeah, I had fun reviewing the Beverly Hills Cop movies. These movies are fun, especially the first 2. Eddie Murphy, that time Eddie Murphy's gonna be great, and definitely it's gonna be fun because we're gonna be doing 48 hours. I'll do it either a little later or tomorrow. But yeah, 48 hours is such an un PC movie, man. Dude, this was when you can just make fun of people and it was just it was funny. No one was offended. you didn't have this bitch generation and stuff like that. So, but yeah. But as usual, fuck Warner Brothers, fuck Disney, fuck Joy Reid, fuck LaBitch James, fuck Kaepernick, fuck Kevin Smith, and fuck Joe Biden. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace!